Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and D.C. Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. We're delighted to team with the Baltimore Public Relations Council to bring you the first, I think this is the first event of 2026, all about earned media and meeting some of the fabulous media outlets in the area. So Lindsay or Ashley, did you want to share more about what BPRC is doing this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. So my name is Ashley Milner. I'm the president of the Baltimore Public Relations Council. As Rebecca said, I am with Maryland State Police. I'm the deputy director of communications. We're super excited for this partnership with Maryland MDDC, and we have a ton of great programming this year that I'm going to let Lindsay talk about in a little bit. But we're happy to have you here. BPRC is a group that just brings a lot of people who are in the public relations and communications field together and helps grow those relationships between, the PR side with the journalism side, because a lot of times we walk hand in hand. And, this partnership with MDDC, I think, is going to be really beneficial for us. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I am really glad that all of you guys are joining us today, especially on the second day back from break. I know yesterday was probably everyone's first day back for a really long time. So welcome, and we appreciate you being here. And looking forward to this new year together. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. So I'll toss it over to Lindsay.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. So good morning, everybody. I'm Lindsay Ebert. I'm the PR director at Devaney and Associates and on the board at BPRC, and also serving as program chair this year. So as Ashley said, thank you for getting with us this morning. We know it's rough coming off the holiday, but we're glad we could make it. So other programs that we're working on this this winter coming up. February 24th, it's on the website now. We're going to have our annual virtual morning with the Baltimore Sun. We're still finalizing all the details now, and we'll have the rest of the speakers list and things confirmed soon, but it is on the website. So please go ahead and sign up. And we're working on a lot of new stuff for the new year. We're hoping to return to the banner in the spring. In April, we will have our spring communications workshop. So please check out our website as we get programs finalized. And now's a great time to join if you haven't purchased your membership for this year yet. And also, I'll do a quick plug. We're also always looking for volunteers to help with our programming, our marketing, and especially at the moment, we have a need on our membership committee. So if any of you are interested in getting more involved this year, if the resolution is to be more involved in your organizations this year, please reach out to any of us for more details. Okay, but this morning, we're very happy to be partnering with the Maryland, Delaware, D.C. Press Association to meet editors from 3 local outlets to learn more about how we can support their needs for news, content, expert resources, etc. And I'm just going to quickly introduce our 2 partners here from MDDC before I turn it over to them to host our panel. So Rebecca Snyder is the executive director of the MDDC Press Association, and she'll be moderating our panel discussion today. She brings a deep and varied background in the industry with experience spanning sales, business development, and operations. In her current role, Rebecca champions the essential role of journalism and civic life and supports MDDC's members as they navigate a rapidly evolving media landscape, helping them grow, innovate, and strengthen their impact on the communities they serve. And Kevin Barrier is the advertising director for MDDC Advertising Services, where he works with businesses and organizations across the U.S. to develop omni-channel marketing strategies and high-impact advertising campaigns. With more than 20 years of experience in creative and data-driven marketing, Kevin helps clients connect with audiences through integrated print and digital solutions. He also supports news organizations within the MDDC Press Association, providing tools and guidance to strengthen their advertising efforts to adapt to a rapidly evolving media landscape. So welcome, Kevin and Rebecca. And I think I will turn it over to you, Rebecca, to get us started with our program.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I just wanted, before we get started with our panelists, Alexis Taylor from the AFRO, Samir Rao from the Daily Record, and Marcus Ditterly from Baltimore Fishbowl, and I will introduce them momentarily. I just wanted to center and contextualize MDDC Press Association. So I see it, we're the trade association that covers local news in Maryland, Delaware, and DC. I see myself as kind of chief cheerleader for that organization. Kevin runs our full service marketing agency, which is attached to MDDC. And since that's a little unusual, I'll let him explain that. But for the MDDC Press Association, you can find us doing all sorts of things to strengthen our members and allow them to really bring their skills, their talents, and their critical journalistic missions to bear on the communities that they serve. So you'll find us in Annapolis, Dover, and DC, advocating for legislative change. You'll find us celebrating the members of our association through our awards, in the MDDC Awards. You'll find us showcasing topics of interest and our members themselves on our podcast, Five Dubs. That's FIVEDUBS. And that's a terrific way that we've found to showcase our members and what's happening in the local news community. We also strengthen, much like BPRC, we strengthen relationships between journalists and journalism organizations within our world. And we are platform agnostic. So we lovingly want to foster good journalism. So that doesn't matter to us whether it's digital only, legacy. We stay a little bit out of broadcast news. They have their own trade association and slightly different issues, but we work very closely together when our interests come together, especially around reporter access to information and so on. So with that, let me allow Kevin an opportunity to share what kind of intersects more with what you do on, and a little bit about paid and earned media. So Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. So I am Kevin Barrier. Like Rebecca said, I am the ad director of MDDC Ad Services. And no, I am not from the North Pole, as many would think I am. But I run the full service advertising agency out of the Press Association here for Maryland, Delaware, and DC. And it's interesting, press associations actually around the United States, by and large, will have a marketing or advertising entity of some capacity within their organization. And I'm the one here for MDDC. I work with agencies all around the United States with Clients Direct. We have a lot of strategic partners that we work with from the paid advertising side, and I think the paid advertising or paid media and earned media side, there is maybe not necessarily a blurring of the lines, but they do run very parallel to each other. So my shameless solicitation, if anyone here within their agencies are looking for an amazing media partner, please give us a call. But one thing I want to call your attention to, a service that we do have that does really intersect well, is our press release distribution services. So we do offer a service where we can distribute your press release to our news media membership, to the people within the organization that the press release really needs to go to. Our press releases, we do vet them on making sure that they're to inform and not necessarily to solicit, to maintain our validity and credibility with our news media members. And they come from Rebecca, our executive director here, to our copy desks and editors within our news media organizations for consideration. We can't guarantee that a news media member will run a press release, but we can guarantee that we'll get in front of the person that makes the decision as to whether or not it does make it to print. So if you are interested, I'm going to drop here in the chat. I'll drop here my contact information. And also, if while we're going about today's panel discussion, I'll be watching the chat. If anyone has any questions, please, by all means, drop it in the chat, and I'll find a good place to interject and make sure that your question gets asked and answered. Oh, you're on mute. Perfect.
Sorry, I've been dealing with a little bit of a cold, and I wanted to spare you all from a little bit of a cough. So I'm going to remove Kevin from the spotlight. I'm going to add our panelists, and I would like to just share sort of housekeeping. We will be monitoring the chat, but we'll also be reserving some time for questions at the very end. This is a wide-ranging conversation, so please feel free to ask what you think is appropriate. Whoops, hang on, let me find Alexis. There we are. Thank you. And we will get started. So let me, in alphabetical order, introduce our panelists. So we'll start with Marcus Ditterly. He's the managing editor at the Baltimore Fishbowl, which is a Baltimore-based independent daily news and lifestyle website. So as the managing editor, he reports a variety of news and feature stories about Baltimore City and the surrounding counties. He edits others' work. He helps manage the social media accounts and aggregates the top Maryland headlines each day. So basically, Marcus is doing a little bit of everything. Previously, he was the deputy editor and features editor at the Cecil Whig in Elkton, and he graduated from Towson. So any tigers out there, raise the roof for them. He graduated in 2018, majoring in mass communications with a concentration in journalism and news media and new media, and also political science. So thank you for joining us, Marcus. We next have Samir Rao, who I think is the most, has just started at the Daily Record in January. So way to jump in, both feet to the fire. Super excited. And the Daily Record is Maryland's business and legal news media organization. Samir leads the editorial team, and he focuses on producing high-quality journalism and providing essential news and information to the Daily Record's legal, government, and business audience. They also, I think they're very well known for political coverage and have their eye on Annapolis Summit is probably your next big event coming up, Samir, which I think is next week.
Yep, next on Wednesday. Yeah.
We are jumping in with both feet to the new year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before Samir came to the Daily Record, he was the editor for the Baltimore and DC Markets for Technically, which is a news organization focused on state, county, and regional tech and startup ecosystems. He graduated from Haverford College and holds a Master of Social Service from Bryn Mawr College. And so big props there as a graduate myself of Bryn Mawr. I'm really glad to have you, Samir. And Alexis strongly believes in the mission of Black press. She's with the AFRO and is the editor at the AFRO News. And she works to make change through journalism by recording history and keeping the Black community informed. She's lived in Charm City since 2008 and is a graduate of both Morgan State University and Johns Hopkins University. So yay. She's a former kindergarten and art teacher, which I did not know about you, Alexis. Love that. And so she's also a photographer with a passion for creating change through the arts. She first began writing for the AFRO as an intern in 2011. So your history with the AFRO is so long. And from there, she served as a freelance journalist and photographer for a decade before joining the AFRO team as news editor in 2022. She became managing editor of the 133-year-old publication in 2023 and has thoroughly enjoyed curating news for the Black community. So thank you for joining us. And Alexis, I love, the AFRO is, I think, the oldest continuously operating Black-owned news organization in the country. Am I getting that right?
Longest continuously running family owned paper.
Got it. Okay. I knew 133 years is nothing to sneeze at no matter what, but it is a huge, huge accomplishment, and we're really proud to have you here. So, that was a lot of introductions, and I wanted to first start off. We talk a little bit, and just I think the three publications or three news organizations that that you represent really are very different in many ways. And I think that's indicative of the media landscape. We have digital only sites, we have legacy news publications, we have people who are bringing along a different mix, and it's a very disrupted media landscape. Across the board, we no longer have worlds where everyone watches the nightly news or reads one publication and so forth. So I'd like to start with asking each of you how your news organization fits into this new media landscape. So understanding your audience and what you bring to the table and what types of stories you're focused on. And so why don't we'll go in alpha order and then we'll start jumping around. So Marcus, what do you think about where the fishbowl sits?
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Baltimore Fishbowl, as Rebecca mentioned, is a local news website. We provide coverage of politics, culture, and other news throughout the Baltimore region. When we launched in 2011, our coverage was more focused on Baltimore City, and we also did a lot of education news, and those remain key priorities for us. But in the over a decade since launching, we've really expanded into the counties and the wider Baltimore region. And our coverage, while it includes education, we also cover a lot of politics, environmental coverage, transportation, pretty much everything under the sun in Baltimore. We like to say we give our readers their dessert, but we also make sure they eat their veggies too. So we give a good balance. And I think our audience has also reflected that. It's grown more diverse geographically, age-wise, race, all in all ways. So we're really proud that we're reaching far more Marylanders and a greater range of Marylanders than when we began. I think you're still on mute, Rebecca.
I'm just going to stay off mute. But I think we all love the house segment that comes out, every Wednesday? That's, I think, the original claim to fame that I first knew about the Fishbowl. But I love that you guys are branching out and looking for more sort of hard news stories to balance some of that dessert and still keeping it really light and fun. So great job on that. Samir, tell us about the Daily Record.
Sure. Thanks. So, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you everyone for coming. Yeah. So the Daily Record, our bread and butter is principally, news that's focused on the legal system in Maryland, the legislative system in the state, and the business ecosystem. So that sounds like a bit of a broad mandate, but that gives you a bit of a sense of kind of who we target in our or sort of like what kinds of topics we most focus on, what stories we most focus on, and also the kinds of readers that we have had for the better part of our existence. So basically a lot of what that means is like, our core readership can include people at the top law firms in the state of Maryland, people working in Annapolis, legislators and their staffs, people in state government departments, whether they're in Annapolis or Baltimore or somewhere else, as well as a lot of people in like C-suites and some of the biggest companies in the state. We have a statewide mandate. So when it comes to our political coverage, the bulk of it, ends up focusing on Annapolis because those are statewide decisions. But we'll also cover things that come through the court systems throughout the counties, throughout the state court system, throughout the federal district of Maryland, the U.S. District Court of Maryland. And so if you even just check our homepage, that's kind of what you'll see. And that tends to be the lens or the set of lenses through which we'll cover a wide variety of topics, whether, it's a way to, we'll cover a court case that is addressing, say, an immigration issue, even though immigration is not necessarily a core beat of ours. That kind of lens allows us to cover a wide swath of things. We'll cover things that come out of the Attorney General's office that may have to do with fraud cases. And that's another way that we'll touch on business. And in addition, and that's in our daily coverage, in addition to our daily coverage, we do a series of special projects and special publications throughout the course of the year. So those will often be honorific lists, recognizing, say, accomplished businesses or people who have led in their respective fields. For instance, I technically started in this position last month, about a month ago, almost to the date. And my first day was one of our key events, which is the Maryland Icon Honors, and that's honoring sort of more seasoned professionals that have like decades long records of accomplishments. And those honorees will include people from state government, from the legal sector, the private legal sector, from the university systems, from various businesses across different industries. So that's kind of the broad swath of like the lenses that we have, and the sort of what I would say, you know, for lack of a better term, kind of channels through which we will cover a number of different topics.
Mhm. No, and I love what you're doing in terms of like the lens of looking at really the mechanics of institutions, business, civic, government. And I think the Daily Record has been really masterful in creating like the juggernaut of events that you have to create opportunities for people to connect in different ways. And I think from a PR perspective, and I know we're talking about earned media here, but at heart, it's really about opportunities to tell one's story, or your client's story. And I think events give a really good way to do that. And so we'll dig in a little bit more. But next, let's hear from Alexis, because the AFRO goes so deep into the Black community. And I'd like to hear your perspective on where you sit in the landscape.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thank you everyone for having me this morning. So the Afro-American newspapers, Afro News, we in 2026 are continuing our mission to use media to create change and educate the masses. We do have a very diverse readership, so it's not just Black people, but we have subscribers from all around the world. We focus on curating news for the Black community, but that's the entire Black diaspora. It's also people of all races, creeds, colors. Personally, I'm always amazed when we do the reports on a quarterly basis and we see where our readership is. It's not just in Baltimore, DC. It's not just in this region. It's not just on the East Coast. We have readers West Coast, outside the country. We have a really good readership right now in Africa. So I'm always amazed when we see those reports and we see people who are reading us outside of the country. We're like, we have to start making sure we curate news for those people too. But here locally, we just want to support the Black community. Our news focuses on promoting not just the triumphs, not just the good things that are happening. We do know that the Black community doesn't always get the shine that they need in traditional, regular mainstream press. So we try to make sure that we're covering the good. We also cover a bit of the bad. So you'll see some of the crime, you'll see some of the reports that we're doing on happenings out of the Attorney General's office, out of the Maryland Public Defender's office. We always try to make sure that we are covering Annapolis. During the session, we have a staff reporter that covers everything happening with the Maryland General Assembly. And we also have a Capitol Hill reporter just to make sure that we have our legislative affairs news really strong. Because we have a lot of readers that are legislators.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of readers and subscribers that are in CEO positions. Just last year in 2025, we had an article that we ran on the correlation between race and credit scores. And out of that news, the Maryland Bankers Association, their CEO is a subscriber. Tisha Edwards, out of that report, she went to Coppin and they did a whole session on credit in the Black community. And so I love when we continue that work of making change, of starting those important conversations, of highlighting things that need adjustments, things that are surrounding policy issues, all of that. We really try to cover that in the Afro. We have a variety of different newsletters that go out on a weekly basis. We have the Faith Works newsletter because we try to have a lot of good coverage of the faith community, both here locally, DC, nationally. We have our 7 Things Roundup, which is just general news. And we really work hard to cover issues for specific subgroups. So people who are returning citizens, returning citizens. You'll see a lot of news. I'm talking about different programming for people who are returning, those issues for people who are still incarcerated. What are they facing behind bars? Policy issues around that subject. We have a senior guide. So 6 times a year, we do a senior guide that is specifically focused on news for people who are in their golden years. But by far, I mean, my favorite beat that we cover really is just that community news, happenings that are taking place in the different neighborhoods, things that the community really can use. You know, if there's a diaper bank that is, has a special support program going on for people who are in need of diapers, or if there is a mentoring group that's looking for young Black males, we really want that pipeline of information to flow freely, so that people can take advantage of the different supports and ultimately improve their communities. So we have a lot of different buckets that we make sure are filled, but I think community, legislative news, of course, health, education, those are some of our top priorities.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and
And
I love
Alexis, real quick there. So Michael has a question in the chat. Who's going to be the journalist covering the Maryland General Assembly this session?
So this session, it will be Ms. Tashi McQueen. She has covered Annapolis for about the last 3 or 4 years for us, but we also have some freelancers who fill in here and there. But Tashi McQueen is our political reporter.
Yeah. And actually, so why don't we, Marcus, does the Fishbowl have a dedicated legislative reporter at this point?
We do not. We're really just a main editorial staff of 2, so we do what we can to cover at the state level, but we leave that to great publications like the AFRO or the Daily Record, who have the bandwidth to cover that.
And actually, Samir, I know Hannah is covering, so why don't you say a little bit about your coverage and who's doing it?
Sure. Yeah. So that's Hannah Gaskell, who is our government reporter. Yeah, as I mentioned before, the state legislature is a huge, it's one of our main focus areas. It's the whole reason that we have the annual I in Annapolis event. The most recent and the latest one of which will be next week on Wednesday, 14th. And so Hannah has a history of covering state government with the Baltimore Sun as well as Maryland Matters. Has been with the Daily Record, I want to say a little under a year at this point, maybe since the spring. But yeah, so she is our main reporter in Annapolis.
Yeah. Thank you. And going back to the AFRO for a second, I think the what is so fabulous about your coverage is you provide this really great capsule coverage. Here's the faith community. Here's, Black business. Here's what's happening in arts and culture. And you've developed different sort of capsule modules to go there. And I think you've been really masterful with thinking through different ways to reach audiences. So you had done the AFRO a couple years ago had news capsules at gas stations, which I thought was super interesting. And I don't know if you're still doing your chicken box feature, but like Facebook Live, that's not for the faint of heart. And I love that Dr. Draper goes and has essentially a live talk show every week. And so I think the AFRO has been really innovative in reaching people. I'm also seeing from Sherry how people contact you all for authors and artists and features and events. So let's, before we get there, so our panelists can start to think about how they want to direct people to specific beats. But we talked a little bit about the fractured media landscape and also that you all are doing really different things. And so if we're centering our conversation from a PR perspective on how earned media placements can happen, how to work best with media outlets, I think there's a thought out there like, oh my goodness, the world's ending, news media is, dissolving, like blah, 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 blah. But there's opportunities, I think, in this landscape. And you all have talked really clearly about the specifics of what your entities bring to the table. So I just wanted to touch briefly on like what areas of sort of where do you find excitement in this new media landscape? And Samir, I see you nodding your head. And so honestly, I'm picking up on the nonverbal cues. Let's go to you first and then see where we go.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, so, at some level, the Daily Record is a trade publication. Anyone can read us, anyone can subscribe. But, as we mentioned before, we have in our head an idea of sort of who the quote unquote core, not the exclusive, but the core audience is. So I think that this is an exciting time for media because there is so much opportunity for publications that are smaller, and maybe they're trade publications, maybe they are not trade publications, but they have some sort of niche audience that they're trying to get. Maybe they're still more general audience, but like the AFRO, like the Fishbowl, I think the Daily Record has this opportunity in this era of sort of distrust of really big brands, whether it's like the Times or the Post or whatever, to sort of distinguish themselves as well as build and sustain and grow their audiences. And I think that that is really where I see a lot of opportunity now. A philosophy that I sort of internalized for myself when I was in my prior position at Technically, and that I've carried into my sort of outlook on the Daily Record and its audience, is that the future of media, whether it's a legacy outlet or a new outlet, print, online, or both, is going to be in cultivating an audience and sustaining it and growing it, and sort of almost playing a role of like community builder, right? The Daily Record, I think, does this quite well, not only editorially, but through events, through, things like icons, like Annapolis, like the other kind of events and special projects based honors that we do throughout the course of the year. And I think that just in a macro sense, it's important for publications to recognize that, you can put the news out there, but that's not all of the work, right? It's the work of, and your audience doesn't necessarily need to be seen as just like a business objective either, right? They're a community that surrounds you. They're a community that you inform. They're a community into which you plug in. And they're a community that has unique needs. Maybe you're not the only place that they're reading. You're probably competing on their scrolls or on their feeds, whether it's on social media or in like, I use the Apple News app pretty religiously. But if it's not in news, like looking for specific news outlets or specific news articles, it's going to be on social media. It might be through some TikTok influencer that they follow, and hopefully that influencer is citing them and citing real news reports and verified information, and not, spreading opinion or rhetoric as if it's information that's verified. So I think that within this landscape, it offers a very interesting opportunity in which publications like the Daily Record, like the AFRO, like the Fishbowl, can be successful in a way that a much bigger publication that is maybe like still has the brand recognition, or has a different brand recognition, or has a bigger audience, they just can't maneuver in the same way. So that's kind of how I see it. And that's how I see, the opportunity that publications like the Daily Record has, particularly in this economic and political climate.
Sure. So like that idea of building community and having this audience that I think from a PR perspective, it's really important to, and it's a lot more work for those trying to place stories, is to sort of match up stories with outlets, with communities. Alexis, I saw you nodding along, and I know the AFRO is very deep into community building. Did you want to add anything to that?
I think Samir hit the nail on the head when he said the piece about community building. I mean, we work hand in hand with the PR agents, and they really help us get the news out there, get it out there in a timely way. And I know when it comes to a publication like the AFRO, we aren't just one beat, we're many beats. We get press releases from book authors, television personalities, but then we also have legislators, we have press releases coming in for so many different beats. So, I'd still say that that relationship is just so important because it really helps us kind of funnel where we need things to go. It's always a great help when people reach out with embargoed information, because as a small team, those embargoes really help us out. Instead of the news coming out at 7 a.m., 2 hours before our offices open, and we only have two full-time staff writers, if it's embargoed news, it helps us prepare on our end, even if someone has to, stay up a little bit later or wake up a bit earlier to make sure it goes out. Those embargoed press releases really help us regardless of topic. When we can get those in, it really helps us as a small publication stay up with the other larger publications. But when it comes to that community building piece, I just say it's so important because the PR agents have that information that they want to get out. And while we could get it from social media, scrolling, which I am known for doing, I'll go on social media to try to just relax and I end up with 10 more stories because,
Right.
so many people get their news from social media now. It gives us ideas as well. But it really helps us fill that pipeline when we have a solid bevy of PR agents that have the news. It helps us curate for those different subcategories within our readership. So I also, Samir, see it as community building, just partnerships working how they're supposed to work so that we can get that information out.
Terrific. And I saw everybody nodding their heads on embargoed news is good news. So, and in the chat, Marcus has put where press releases can go. Samir will, I'm sure, add that as well, so it can go to Marcus or Eliza. I know Michael has a question, and we'll get to his question, and then we'll turn to how PR people can help you. How best to make you happy as PR people are sending in their items. So, Michael, do you want to join us and share? I'm going to put you on spotlight too.
Thanks, Rebecca. Not for the spotlight, but for the question. And of course, my phone's ringing right now. Alexa, just wanted to follow up on what you just said about kind of embargoes. I've tried pushing that with our team a lot more to give reporters a couple of days and embargo it, and I think it works really well. On the flip side, I just wanted to kind of flag. We hear often from some of the freelancers at AFRO here at University of Maryland Medical System who need a health expert, doctor, clinician, et cetera, for something. And we're always interested and happy to help and provide that expertise. I just wanted to flag that often we're hearing at the very last minute, right? It's, hey, I need this by today or tomorrow. And we are absolutely used to turning things around quickly and doing what we can. But with doctors, it's a particular challenge because obviously they're probably not going to see it until maybe that night or the next morning. So just a word of, I guess, request that if you can kind of share with some of the freelancers, the earlier they can get the request to us, the more likely it is that we'll find someone to help with this story. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Will do. Thank you. Rebecca, I see you.
Well, I think it's such a good point that it goes both ways. I mean, everybody likes to have their news early, but then we've all been approached by a reporter who's on deadline, like right now, and it can be stressful, but the news cycle is very, very quick. So, it kind of just understanding the time constraints around everybody in the group
Yeah,
is
absolutely, Rebecca. I think many of us on this side, across BPRC are former journalists, so we absolutely get it. We understand the news cycle, and I think a lot of us, are used to, the breaking news and jumping on something that we weren't planning on doing that morning. But I think I guess I'm speaking of more of like the evergreen, or it's National Fill in the Blank Month, and I'm doing a feature story on whatever that disease may be. Clearly folks have known for 11 months that it's coming up, right? So it's hard sometimes on Monday to say, hey, I need this by Tuesday morning, right? It's just,
right.
it makes it more challenging if it's not this is the breaking news of the day kind of thing. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that.
And can I
Okay,
just
so
say something
Okay,
came
go
up.
ahead, Alexis. I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
Thank you, Michael. And I always tell our reporters and our freelancers something that's been told to me, that emergencies for you are not emergencies for everyone. You cannot force anyone to speak with you that day or even the next day. But since we're PR, it's a session on PR, I will say one thing that really helps us out. Um, at the top of the month and throughout the month, we have some PR agents who send me these lovely emails that say, hey, it's it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We're reaching out. I believe it's MedStar who does this. There's a really good PR agent over at MedStar, and her name is slipping my mind. I'm sorry if she's here. Thank you. But she's really helpful because at the top of the month, she'll send out an email that says, hey, it's October, it's Cancer Awareness Month. Here are the experts that we have available. Here are the doctors that we have available. And then that helps us to know, hey, these are people who are asking us to comment. They want us to reach out to them. So instead of having a reporter, search through different resources that they have to connect with doctors or medical professionals, I can just say, hey, you can go right over to this PR agent. She just reached out. She's looking to make comment or to put together interviews for your article. So those are just really, really helpful for us. We get them throughout the month, but really at the top of the month if it's something awareness related, and that really helps us out. But we will also work in 2026 on giving more time.
I think that's all a developing skill for each of us, like, working farther ahead. Um, and Alexis, you bring up a really good point that, when we're talking about from a public relations perspective, how you're telling your clients' stories. It's not just placing a press release or seeding a story. It's also being named as as an expert or being used as a source. So, if you all can shift your hats from journalism to the PR side, what are ways that you see, if a public relations professional is trying to place a client or raise the visibility of a client, what are different ways that you have that you see as a journalist that creates the credibility? Because that's why people want to work with news media. We're credible. We are authentic. We're accurate. Um, what are ways you would suggest public relations people working with news media to raise visibility for their clients? And Marcus, we haven't heard from you in a while. Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, of course. I think kind of piggybacking off of what Alexis said is that it's helpful when PR professionals reach out proactively with, maybe there's not this big announcement, but offering sources if you are working on a story that aligns with their focus area. And that really helps build that relationship over time so that down the line, if I'm working on a story related to that, I think of that PR professional and I go to them because, we have that working relationship. I think also it's really helpful for both us and for the PR professional if they are readers of our publications and not just they've skimmed our website, but that they really know what we cover and how we cover it to make sure that the story that they're pitching is a good fit for us or that they are pitching it in a way that we can really see it, living on our site. Because the, you know, the same basic foundation of the story might be pitched, to Baltimore Fishbowl or the Daily Record or the AFRO, but the way that it's pitched or the angle that they're maybe proposing might be different for each. So I think that's really helpful is coming to us with that.
I love that. And could you say more, or other panelists say more about the idea of pitching the same story in different ways to different outlets, and how nobody wants sloppy seconds from anybody. So like, how do you take a good story and make sure that, especially in with a lot of smaller outlets and just a lot of outlets in the world, it's not going to be a single story for each outlet. What do you think about pitching the same story different places, and how do you approach it? And anyone can jump in on that, because everybody wants the scoop, and I totally get that.
I have a few thoughts that I can share. And I'll echo, pretty much everything that Marcus said. I mean, I think it's fine to like pitch multiple outlets, but if you're pitching a scoop, you should pitch one. There are a lot of instances I think that I've had in my career, and I've been an editor full time for, it's going on about 4 or so years now. Before that, I was a reporter, so this happened to me a lot as a reporter too, where it's like clear that whatever the PR agency, or maybe it was a PR rep within an organization or a company, they wanted to cast the net wide, right? But then it comes, then we find out, okay, you've tried to place pretty much the same story with another outlet, maybe a competitor, maybe not a competitor, but we all want distinct stories, right? Even if we're covering the same thing, we don't want our stories to be the exact same as other outlets, because, we all have kind of different audiences. We want things that matter to our audiences, to our readers, to the kind of mission that we're trying to serve, whether we are a general audience, general beat publication, or we're a trade publication with a specific audience and a specific set of topics and lenses through which we cover certain issues, right? So I think it helps that for a pitch to be crafted, one, with an understanding of what that publication does and how, as Marcus said, that pitch you're making could fit within the kinds of coverage that our publication does. And we also don't want to be seen as like, if we run this great story that you've given us as a scoop, and then we see something that looks very similar in another outlet, maybe beforehand, then it just doesn't look right. It feels like, yeah, we were sort of treated as like second fiddle because you actually really wanted, I don't know, the Banner or something, or you really wanted like the New York Times, but you couldn't get them quite in time. So you hedged your bets with us. That's not a great feeling. No one wants to feel like the things that are offered ostensibly as being special or specific or exclusive are actually being pitched otherwise or pitched the same way to other outlets. So that's like one note on that. What I'll also say is I think that there are a lot of ways too that people can plug in when they're making pitches. Like they can do it in a couple of different ways, but they can do it with a couple of different, I guess, ends in mind. And if you can kind of make that explicit, that is helpful. So like, for instance, if you pitch me momentarily, but if you pitch me something, want to know, well, what does this look like or kind of relate to other coverage that we've done? Is it for our legal section, for our government section, for our business section? To that point, I will also say, I guess like 2 other things, which is, I think that at least for me in my history as an editor, even before coming to the Daily Record, the thing that was always, I think, I always found most challenging was, getting people to submit nominations for any of our special series. So, a PR rep, particularly an outside one representing another company, they may be thinking, oh, we have one story we know we want to get out. And that's how you pitch it. If I come back and say, hey, I'm not sure about the story, we'll see what kind of capacity we have. We run with a small staff. We only have X number of reporters. But hey, we have this special honorifics thing coming up. Do you think that there's someone at this company who would work really well for this list? And they don't respond, or they don't submit, or they make a submission and it's actually not a very good fit. Then there's this sense of like, there's another story that you, the PR person, could have pitched that is kind of like the story that you were trying to pitch, but it didn't land maybe the way that you. I think
Right.
that particularly with honorific series, if you're trying to promote something positive a client's doing, it may not sit well for like daily coverage. But it might sit better for one of these special packages or these special honorifics. And I think that like, that's something that folks on this call can definitely keep in mind is like, it's never, very rarely is a story like a hard no, but it might just not be fit for the time or for the occasion. If it's a hard no because you didn't, understand quite what we do as a publication, then that's a hard no. But like, that's not always a closed doors, I guess what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
And then the last thing I'll say too is, there are also the Daily Record offers about like a couple of different vehicles for, paid placement on things. And it might be worth just sort of thinking about, is the thing that you're trying to place something that might be better as like a paid option for a certain kind of news item that we otherwise just maybe wouldn't have the capacity to cover most of the time. And I can give a little more information on that. I don't know Rebecca, if you have like questions about that later that you would rather ask, and I can wait to give that information then, or I can give it now.
Well, let's kind of follow that along because I think there's
Sure.
if we think about the mission for public relations professionals to raise visibility of a client. There's the newsworthy story, and so I want to get to what is a newsworthy story versus I'm just trying to raise up my CEO and get more visibility for that person versus here's the mission of this organization. We really just want to hear the word. And what I'm hearing from you, Samir, is that, there's different when you think of like those elements, there's a couple different arrows in your quiver. There could be events or honorifics. There could be on the move kind of things where you're talking about this is where that person's going. It could be an actual news story. And so I'm interested, Alexis and Marcus, can you tell a little bit more about the opportunities that are there for those different types of coverage? And then also, what makes it a newsworthy pitch versus I just want to get placement for my person?
I can jump in. So each year, we have a breakfast where we meet with PR agents, PR professionals, and we lay out all of our special editions for the next year. So in 2025, we did something a bit different, but generally, in 2026, we're going back to what we were doing before as far as our special edition schedule. We will have one special edition a month. And so, usually in the fall, we'll have a breakfast where we invite all of the PR professionals and we'll let them know, hey, in January, we're going to have an edition solely dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr., but also people who are continuing his work. So if you have a profile that you would like done, if there's someone that you're representing that has done work in the community, January would be the best placement for that. If they are a woman, then you may want to come to us in March when we're doing our coverage of International Women's History Month. If it's something about Black business specifically, you might wait until August, which is Black Business Month. And so that calendar really helps us as far as that relationship with the PR professional, because we can give that to them in the fall. They'll already know what to expect month by month in the next year. And it just helps us get on schedule. I would say when pitching, I think um, Samir and Rebecca, you all were touching on this in the last question, but really just pay attention to what their readership is. At the AFRO, we are curating news for the Black community. We get hundreds of pitches each week. And I would say I know we get about 1,500 emails a week. Of the ones that are pitching different stories or profiles, I would say about 30 to 35% of them don't have anything to do with the Black community. The AFRO isn't going to do a spread on white authors. We're just not. There are hundreds of publications locally, nationally, internationally that could cover a spread of, white authors. We would be looking for the Black authors who have put out a text or put out a fiction um, piece, and we want to give them shine. So I would say, paying attention to what demographic they're serving, not to say that we don't include white voices, because we do. If it's a medical story and there's, a top doctor that we can speak to that isn't Black, but it's the top doctor in a position or an expert in a particular field, we would want to include them. But we want as much as possible for the AFRO to promote Black experts, Black entrepreneurs, authors, so that they can also get equal publicity and time in front of readers. So I would just say, keep in mind who you're pitching to, what they're looking for. But a good pitch for us, and to your question of what makes it newsworthy, I would say to keep in mind that we don't just want to become a paper of, hey, here's a new CEO and here's a new CEO. We try to tie that, even though some of those, to hard news stories. So, if there's a new CEO working in, let's say, youth literacy, at a youth literacy organization, we wouldn't necessarily 100% of the time just put out, or use our capacity to do a full in-depth look at the new CEO. On a news standpoint, we might include them in some of our coverage. And then as we're doing that, say, hey, by the way, this person is, leading this new organization. We might talk with them about their priorities for 2026. What are their top priorities in that role? What are, it's a new CEO, but what advice do they have to other HBCU grads or other Black CEOs in that space? So as much as possible, we try to kind of merge it, and I wouldn't say make it newsworthy, but try to tie it to another topic and make it more than just, hey, this CEO is out here, but more so, hey, this is the new CEO of this agency. Here's their agenda, things you should look out for in 2026 that they'll be doing. So we can come back at the end of the year. Did they achieve those goals? Did they meet those markers that they set at the top of their appointment, would be success markers for them? So try to do not just straight not just do straight CEO profiles, but also talking about goals, things that'll help the community. And then I'll also say, I know the Daily Record and Fishbowl probably have this as well, but we have sponsored content. So if it is not specifically something that we're looking for, you can always purchase an ad and, announce your new CEO, or announce something that you really want to get in front of our readership if editorial turns it down.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing there is that if you have a person that you're trying to pitch, make sure you're tying it into the why. Like, why is this important? And then also recognize, and I wanted to get into this, and I'll loop back to you, Marcus, to see if you have anything to add on newsworthy stories. But I want to head to um, what happens in the process, because the pitch doesn't always stay the pitch. And once you lovingly craft your pitch and give it to a journalist, it can turn into anything. You do not have control over that story. And so that's where, to your point, Alexa, sponsored content, um, event profile, something where you are controlling the narrative might be a more logical way to go about achieving your aims. But while y'all are marinating on that one, Marcus, did you have anything to add on what makes a newsworthy story for you?
Yeah, I would just say Baltimore Fishbowl really loves the quirky stories. So if something's odd, like, we see that as a good thing. If you can really differentiate your story from everything else going on, if you can differentiate the source, expert that you are proposing and explain what different perspective they bring to the table that we might realize, oh, that's lacking from the story that we're telling. We want to bring in, that voice. Um, just like what sets you apart and what sets this story apart from what readers might be finding elsewhere. That makes it enticing for us to do a story.
Yeah. And so I did. Let's think about a case study, I guess. If you have someone's pitching you a report, and the PR professional can lovingly craft the pitch, but then what happens to it? Like if it's kind of a specious report, or they say, okay, well, all right, this is an interesting thing. Can you talk about like what the process is once you receive a pitch? It's not like they're just picking up your press release and running it. So, can you all talk a little bit about the journalism that applies to a pitch and how PR professionals can expect um, things to happen in the crucible of journalism? Go
Yeah,
ahead, Marcus.
if a story piques my interest, but maybe the angle isn't quite right. I tried to kind of like yes and or yes but the PR professional and work with them to see like do they have another source who might fit better, or how can we still work together even if the initial message isn't quite right. Um if if we're emailing back and forth or calling back and forth, like I want to keep that door open, and so hopefully they feel the same. And kind of how Samir talked earlier, um if that initial story is a no, like you still might be a good fit for the stories that the organization wants to tell. It just might not be the right time or right circumstances, so just keeping that line of communication open.
Okay. Anyone else on what happens in the process?
Sure. So when we get a pitch here at the Afro, after reading through it, we see if there is a way for us to get it assigned and on the page, but branch out. So, what I'm thinking, so I can say this. So, the Afro is a part of Word in Black. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Word in Black, but it is a collective of the top 10 Black newspapers in the country. We share news. They help us out because we have pretty small newsrooms. So last year, Word in Black did a whole series on transplants, issues surrounding medical transplants in the Black community, the whole nine. We had someone come to the Afro with a pitch, and they said, "Hey, Word in Black just did this full series on transplants. We have the doctor that spoke to Word in Black, and he's available to speak to the Afro." And I told them, well, we're part of Word in Black. We can pick up the Word in Black story. So if you have other experts, let's look deeper into the program that the doctor was tied to, which was a program in Georgia where 8 Georgia HBCUs are working with medical doctors to improve community awareness around implants in the Black community. They're speaking with medical students at HBCUs to get more representation in that medical field when Black patients go to get a transplant, talking to Black nurses, Black doctors. So their pitch to us was to speak with the same doctor that another publication had spoken with. We turned it around and said, hey, we don't want to duplicate what Word in Black did, but we want to go in depth on that program so that hopefully other HBCUs in other states will start looking and say, hey, well, we're not in Georgia, but we're in South Carolina. What could we do with transplantation, transplants, and informing our community, getting our doctors and nurses at the HBCUs onto that transplant path, as opposed to, maybe working with elderly or pregnant people. They would go into medical transplant teams. So we changed the pitch a little bit because we didn't want to duplicate what another publication did. It was still meeting the goal of this person, the PR professional that reached out, getting the news out about that program. So, when we get a pitch, we look at what Word in Black has done. We look at what we've done in the past. I would say that's a really good tip. I tell all our writers, as soon as you get an assignment, your first stop is to go to afro.com and see who we've spoken to, because we don't want to speak with the same people. If I don't say that, every year we would have the exact same people. And we've even had that, that happen where, we look up and we're like, okay, the last time we did a story on this, you spoke with Reverend James. And the year before, someone else spoke with Reverend James. Like, we have to expand our database as far as expert opinions. And so I would say, before you reach out with a pitch, look at what we've already done, look at who we've already spoken to. If it's the same person, what's the new angle? All of those things go into consideration when we receive a pitch.
Hmm. Samir, anything to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, depending on the sort of nature of the pitch, if it is something for a client, my first thought will be, well, is this actually best fit in one of those three sort of programs for paid content that I had mentioned before? And if it is, I or whatever editor at TDR gets pitched will mention, hey, I think this would be a good fit for this, and say as much, send the link for submissions. That also explains what kind of, in a broader sense, what kind of stories or news updates or like, articles, whatever, kind of fit within those particular categories. The second thing that I'll go to is this a good fit to assign to one of our two reporters? More often than not, that isn't the case, just because they'll be on top of other things that are coming out of the court systems or the state government. That, there's just a deluge of that news, and that's just where their priorities have to lie. But I'll also think, if it can't be assigned as like a daily article, is this a good fit for one of our special editions, one of our honorific series, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then within that, I also go, I guess, mentally myself through a process, and I'll discuss this with other editors too. If I'm thinking, oh, this could be a fit here, maybe it's not fit here, what do you think? Or if they get the pitch, they'll weigh it with me, and I'll kind of determine, hey, maybe this could be good for this special project down the line, or hey, maybe this story's not a fit, but it could be, this person could be a good source if, Hannah, our government reporter, Ian, our primarily focuses on legal stuff. That our reporter probably focuses on the courts. If he, is writing a feature piece or considering a trend piece, something that a bigger picture issue that isn't a daily update, could this person be a good expert source? Those are the kinds of considerations I go through, and those tend to be, to an extent, those are fixed. Those are decisions fixed around certain, those are decisions fixed, revolving around fixed points of information, like, oh, this is a fit or this is not a fit based on the things we cover. Sometimes it's a little bit grayer, and I'll be like, well, okay, maybe this person could fit if we were to try and do something around this. Like, oh, maybe this person could be good if we're trying to talk about tariffs or something like that, if they are an expert in international trade. Maybe this person would be good to talk about extradition law now that,
Oh, Samir, you went on mute somehow. And now you're still on mute. So strange. Yeah, there you go. I think you're
okay,
good now.
can you hear me now? It I
Yes.
unmuted and then it muted suddenly. I maybe there was something I did with my one of the buttons on my earbuds by accident. Sorry. I don't know where I cut off, but thinking about like, maybe this person might not be right for this story, but they could be right for like a feature story or a trend piece down the line based on their expertise and what's going on in the news at the time. I think that stuff is always, those are the considerations I always go through. And I think that underscoring all of these questions that I ask is the broader question of what can this story or this source or this subject offer our readers? What do they have that our readers want to know about? I've mentioned before who kind of the core pots of our readership are. There's a sense of like, does this person's expertise or does this piece of news that you're trying to promote or what have you, if it doesn't immediately scan as being, oh, this is something that could fit into one of our paid content portals because it's obviously something that's just very fit for that and not for editorial coverage, where in the editorial coverage can they plug in? And what does that mean for the people that read our publication? So that's something I think is, that's something that, and the last thing I'll say about that too is I think similar to Marcus and Alexis, within all of these thoughts is a sense of trying to weigh possible newsiness against the capacity that we just know we have as a small publication with like 2 reporters. Soon to be 3. Hopefully I'm hiring a legal reporter as well. So if anyone knows anyone with a law degree or some legal reporting background, feel free to send them my way. But that's the kind of thing that I think we're always thinking about because, something could be newsier if we had the capacity to take on this thing. And then maybe it would be a cool story to have alongside all the other accountability stuff that we have. But if that's taking someone's capacity away from being present, particularly now with like, it's the beginning of the year, just as all your clients have announcements, so do a bunch of huge companies and law firms, so does the state government, so do the courts, et cetera, then we have to always make those capacity assessments as well.
Thank you for that, Samir. And so I want to ask about underrepresented voices, and then we'll and mechanics of how people find out about all those special sections and editorial calendars, and then we'll open up for questions from the group because I know mindful of time, and we need to release everyone back into the wild at 10:30. So let's talk about underrepresented voices. I think Sandy had a question about what story ideas and community voices do you think are currently underreported in the region? And what can PR professionals do to help surface those stories in a way that's helpful to you all? I think everybody's thinking. But I'm going to jump to you, Alexis, because this is that's what the AFRO does on the regular and has for 133 years. You are sourcing voices that are usually overlooked by quote unquote mainstream news media. So tell us a little bit about what you think is underrepresented now.
Thank you. So I think right now, our most underrepresented voice is really the voice of the community. I think one thing that the AFRO does really well is ask the community what they're thinking. How do they feel about policies that are impacting their day-to-day life? Getting that average voice to respond to what they see happening. But, in addition to that, the people who are actually doing the work. And so, for an example, I would say here in Baltimore, we know that Mayor Brandon Scott gave, I believe it was 4.6 million in aid back in November to offset everything that was happening with the SNAP funds. And so I think one thing that we do really well, because we're such a small team, we can't just always immediately turn something around. And so it requires that we go back and really, in making it newsworthy, include some of those voices that weren't heard when when the news first broke. And so, for example, when Mayor Scott made that announcement, we were there, we went live. Someone wrote up really quickly something from the live, but really what we do well is going back to the organizations that were supposed to get the money. How are you all using it? Where are you in the process of it being dispersed to you? Really just doing some of that accountability legwork. They said 4.6 million was coming, but we want to speak with the individual organizations who are actually feeding people. How will they use the money? How will this, offset some of their costs? And so we went in, we dug in and spoke with some people who received the money, some people who are in talks to receive the money. What's their plan to use it? And really just highlighting those voices that are underrepresented when it comes to actually doing the work in the community. So, we might do a bigger story on who's leading United Way of Central Maryland and a large overview of what they're doing, or if they send us a press release, we might run that. But then we'll go and we'll talk to the actual people who received the funds or received the resources that were mentioned in the press release that was sent to us. How is it helping you day to day? Is it helping? What could make the program better? And so that's what I mean when I say the voices of the community and the people who are really doing the work, I would say are most uh, underrepresented.
I think that what I'm getting from that is you're looking at sort of a very grassroots piece. So when a PR professional is crafting a pitch, it should have not just, the United Way CEO Franklin Baker, but like how it's being how whatever's happening is affecting somebody in the community, and being able to say, "Oh, this is what it feels like when I'm going about my day to day, or I'm part of a group that's helping someone directly." So that makes perfect sense. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. And I tell my reporters and freelancers, they already know the story is not complete until you have that voice. Because what we were seeing was we would, Baltimore City Public Schools would put out something and we would do that surface level story, maybe on some program for youth. And then they would come back and no youth would be in the article. And so last year we really worked hard. Like, don't write a story about youth and you didn't speak to any youth. Don't write a story about, maternal health crisis or something that's happening with pregnant Black women and you didn't speak to any pregnant Black women. And I think that we see that on a national level as well. It'll be a news story or a quick news hit about a program in the Black community, but they are only talking about the people who donated the money or the
Mhm.
people who made the decision to do the donation, which may or may not represent someone or look like someone from our community. And so that's one major thing that PR professionals can help us out with. If you're going to send us a press release about a program impacting youth, include in your process a way to set up interviews with someone who benefited from those programs, because to us, that vets it. You can
Mhm.
say, oh, we have $4.6 million to help food insecurity, and then, you never hear anything about it again, or if you do hear about it, it's not good. So we want to have that accountability baked into the cake. When we're doing our interviews, they said 4.6 million. Did y'all get your share of that? What did you do with it? Did it go to a salary, or was it a bonus for someone, or did it actually provide food for families in need?
Got it. Samir, I saw you shaking your head or nodding a bit. So tell us a little bit about underrepresented voices in your audience.
Sure. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think that this is a thing with news media across the United States, is that there are, the voices of working class communities and communities of color just don't get represented as with the nuance that they should. Um, but that's not just Baltimore. It's particularly maybe noticeable in Baltimore because it's a predominantly Black city, but it is true across the country. Um, but I guess like from my purview of like undertold stories, um, I mean, one of the big things that we do focus on outside of the sort of the more firm kind of lenses that we typically focus on with the courts and the legal system and state government is broader business and economic development. So stories about or just even just like pitches around people who are involved in broader economic development or sort of like local economic service type stuff, whether it's, maybe they volunteer with the Chamber of Commerce in their county or, maybe represent one of these chambers and there are certain projects that they're doing, particularly around access to resources for people and communities that are underinvested in or under-resourced or have been traditionally frozen out of the traditional pipelines for business success. I think that those are always interesting stories. I think that for me, I mean, there's some great trade publications in the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore, but I also think that aspects of the just like how the economy works outside of the state's and region's biggest employers, whether they're public or private, there can always, I think, be more coverage on that. The startup ecosystem was obviously a core focus for me when I was at Technically, and that's something that I don't think people in the city necessarily know about. When they think about, say, Maryland's economy or Baltimore's economy, they'll think about the federal government and all the changes that have happened in the past year to make that not as dependable of an economic base. The state government and things that have happened to make that not as dependable of an economic base. And, a handful of, the eds, meds, and feds, I guess, as you would call it, the medical systems, the universities, as well as maybe some big companies like Mason or Under Armour or whatever. And what I think is missing from that are some of the more dynamic and sort of not as big, but they're still massively influential and really emerging kinds of sectors of our economy, whether it's tech startups or, uh, you know, the cannabis economy. There are just things that I think can be covered in a bit more depth with a bit more nuance. I'll give an example. I mean, I remember in 2023, I believe it was, there was a longtime source of ours of Technicallys that had contributed to the publication, Pavel Lepere, the head of a local startup, EcoMap Technologies, who was pretty brutally murdered. And after she was murdered, a ton of media outlets around the city who maybe they had never covered EcoMap, maybe they never even cared about local tech, swooped in and covered the story of this like murder, which was, obviously important coverage, but I think it missed a lot of context because it was like, oh, this girl was a tech founder. And it didn't really necessarily get into some of the nitty gritty that I think could have been done around like, well, what really was her impact on the community? I think that Technically was able to get a really great set of stories around that. But it was a big deal. It led to two pieces of legislation that moved pretty fast through the General Assembly. One, allocating money for student entrepreneurship to TEDCO. One, allocating, reforming some of the laws around violent sexual offenders getting released from prison. And some of that stuff, it moved so fast. And I think it was just really, Technically didn't have a ton of resources to cover that legislative piece as it moved that fast. And a lot of the bigger outlets in town maybe would have missed this piece because they didn't know how important she was to this local community to the point that her murder could influence legislation at that level, right? So I think that there are just little dynamics about how powerful certain aspects of, or what kind of role certain aspects of the regional and local economy have that just don't get quite understood. It's something that I think we do cover well at the Daily Record. It's something that I hope to continue to grow our coverage on. And I think that aspect is important and undercovered in a lot of ways. And the last thing I'll say is, we're a statewide publication. So, there's a ton of local media in Western Maryland or the Eastern Shore, these regions outside of the main population belt between Metro Baltimore and Metro DC. And those, I think, are undercovered stories as well across the board.
So I'm just mindful of time. We've got 4 minutes left. I do want to open up for questions while people are developing their questions. You can raise your hand and we'll take a couple there. While you guys are formulating your questions, Marcus, do you have just a brief comment on underrepresented community?
Yeah, I think Samir and Alexis both covered things really well. I just add that I think sometimes there's habit to like automatically defer to institutional voices because of their deep roots in Baltimore and in Maryland. And they do lend great perspectives. So I don't want to say, don't use them. But I think it's also important to bring in fresh voices and fresh perspectives. So it doesn't have to be an either or, it should be an and. So, like Alexis said, making sure that reporters aren't going back to the same sources over and over again, whether it's specific sources or just types of sources, making sure that you really expand who you're talking to.
Okay, thank you so much, Marcus. Well, I just really want to thank all three of you for coming and sharing your wisdom. It's been really very thought-provoking, very interesting. We will synthesize this and send out takeaways from the session. This has been recorded, as you know, so it'll be on the BPRC website. We'll also turn this into a podcast for 5 Dubs, so stay tuned on that. And I really just appreciate the opportunity to share with you all and look forward to working with you all in different capacities.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.